Zarnok, a young alien from the distant planet of Sylar, stood at the edge of the Galactic Council's grand meeting hall. His smooth, silvery skin shimmered under the artificial lights, and his 3 eyes scanned the crowd nervously. He had been chosen for a mission unlike any his species had ever undertaken, an exchange program with Earth. Earth, to the Axilarians, was a planet of extremes. Its inhabitants, humans, were strange creatures who thrived in conditions that would be lethal to many other species in the galaxy. They breathed a mix of gases that could oxidize alien biology, consumed substances that were toxic to most known species, and somehow still built towering cities and advanced technology. It was a planet where chaos and beauty intertwined, and Zarnok was about to experience it firsthand. The Galactic Council had decided that Earth was to be studied, not just for its resources, but for the resilience and ingenuity of its inhabitants. Zarnok had been briefed extensively. He knew Earth's water was filled with microorganisms and pollutants that could wreak havoc on his system. The air was thick with oxygen that would burn his lungs if not properly filtered, and the food, well, the less said about Earth's food, the better. Zarnok, a voice boomed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Councillor Varric, the elder statesman who had overseen Zarnok's preparation for the mission. The time has come. Are you ready? Zarnok took a deep breath, his last of Silurian air for a long while, and nodded. I'm ready, Councillor. Good. Remember your training, and above all, observe. The humans are a fascinating species, and there is much we can learn from them. With a final nod, Zarnok stepped into the teleportation chamber, his heart racing as he prepared to be transported to Earth. In a flash of light, he disappeared from Sylar, only to reappear moments later in a remote forest on Earth. The planet's atmosphere hit him like a wall. His specialized suit, designed to filter the air and protect him from the elements, adjusted quickly, but Zarnok could feel the weight of Earth's gravity pressing down on him. His eyes adjusted to the sunlight filtering through the trees, and he cautiously took his first steps on human soil. Mission log, Day 1, Zarnok whispered into his communicator. Arrival on Earth successful. Atmosphere and gravity, heavier than expected, but manageable. As he walked through the dense forest, he marveled at the life around him. The trees were taller than anything on Sylar, and the sounds of animals echoed through the air. Earth was vibrant, alive in ways Zarnok had never seen before. He had read about the planet's diverse ecosystems, but seeing it firsthand was an entirely different experience. Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes caught his attention. Zarnok froze, his heart pounding. From the shadows emerged a small creature, four-legged and furry. It stared at Zarnok with wide eyes, curious but unafraid. A native life form, Zarnok murmured, pulling out his scanner. The device beeped softly as it analyzed the creature. Mammalian, harmless. The creature sniffed the air, then bounded away into the underbrush, leaving Zarnok alone once more. He exhaled in relief, realizing how tense he had been. Note to self, he said, recording his thoughts. Earth's wildlife may be curious, but it appears to pose no immediate threat. Still, caution is advised. As Zarnok continued his journey through the forest, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. His suit's sensors detected no other life forms in the immediate vicinity, but the sense of unease persisted. Perhaps it was just the unfamiliarity of the planet that was playing tricks on his mind. After a few hours of walking, Zarnok reached the outskirts of a small human settlement. He activated his suit's cloaking mechanism, rendering him invisible to the naked eye. His mission was to observe, not interact, at least not yet. From his vantage point, Zarnok watched as humans went about their daily lives. They were smaller than he had expected, their movements quick and efficient. He saw them using strange machines to transport themselves, communicate, and even prepare their food. Their technology was primitive compared to Silurian standards, yet there was a certain elegance to its simplicity. One human in particular caught Zarnok's attention, a young woman with short, dark hair and a determined look on her face. She was tinkering with a device that Zarnok couldn't quite identify. Intrigued, he zoomed in with his scanner. Human female, Zarnok whispered into his communicator. Appears to be engaged in some form of mechanical work. Fascinating. Her focus and skill are remarkable for a species with such limited technology. The woman wiped sweat from her brow, then smiled as the device whirred to life. She had fixed it. Zarnok felt a strange sense of admiration. Humans, for all their flaws, were undeniably resourceful. As the day turned to night, Zarnok retreated back into the forest to set up his base of operations. His temporary shelter, hidden beneath the trees, provided him with all the equipment he needed to monitor the humans from a distance. Mission log, Day 1, conclusion, Zarnok said, leaning back in his chair. Earth is a place of contradictions. Its beauty is undeniable, but danger lurks beneath the surface. The humans, though primitive, possess an ingenuity and determination that I did not expect. I will continue my observations and report back with more findings soon. As he settled in for the night, Zarnok couldn't help but think about the young human woman he had seen. There was something about her, something that stirred his curiosity. He would need to keep a closer eye on her in the days to come. For now, though, he had much to learn about this strange, wonderful planet called Earth. Adapting to Earth. Zoltar's mind raced as he processed everything his professor had told him. Earth was not only a hazardous planet for Glorans, but the challenges went far beyond the toxic air and water. Earth's entire ecosystem was a minefield of unpredictable and dangerous elements. Zoltar couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of dread at what lay ahead. As he stood outside his Earth history class, the artificial warmth of the campus grounds barely masking the strange mixture of foreign gases that filled the air, he pulled out his Earth-proof tablet and scrolled through the orientation manual. Each section was filled with survival tips and warnings about the human world. While he found these tips useful, none of them fully prepared him for the actual experience of living among humans. Navigating Earth's atmosphere to start, the oxygen levels on Earth were far higher than what his body was used to. Glorans, as a species, evolved to thrive on a planet where oxygen was a rare commodity. Breathing in too much oxygen could lead to serious health issues, and Zoltar was already beginning to feel the effects. His chest tightened as he fought to maintain control over his disguise, ensuring that no human would notice anything unusual about him. Fortunately, his species had developed technology to help regulate these conditions. His suit, a thin, nearly invisible layer of biosynthetic material, adjusted to Earth's atmosphere, allowing him to breathe comfortably without drawing attention. Still, every breath felt foreign, like he was inhaling the essence of a strange, alien world. The complexity of human emotions. As Zoltar continued to adjust, he noticed something else about humans that was more puzzling than their environment, their emotions. Humans, as he observed, were emotionally volatile creatures, shifting from joy to anger to sadness with little warning. In his biology class, Zoltar found himself observing the interactions between humans more than the material the professor was covering. One student in particular caught his attention, Emily, a bright-eyed girl who sat in the front row of the class. Zoltar was fascinated by the way her emotions seemed to radiate from her. During lectures, she was deeply focused, her brow furrowed in concentration. But between classes, Zoltar would catch her laughing and joking with her friends, her mood shifting as easily as Earth's weather. For Glorans, emotions were far more subdued. Zoltar's people communicated primarily through subtle body movements and slight changes in color, expressions of feeling that humans would likely never notice. This stark difference in emotional expression fascinated him, and as much as he tried to focus on his mission, he found himself studying Emily more than the biology of Earth. Surviving human interactions. It wasn't long before Zoltar's fascination with human behavior led to his first real test, an invitation to join a group of students for a social event. Jake, the same student from history class, bounded up to Zoltar after their next lecture. Hey Zolta, a bunch of us are heading out to grab some pizza after class. You wanna come? Zolta's mind raced. Human food was still a mystery to him, and his suit was designed to prevent any harmful substances from entering his body. But this was an opportunity to study human social interactions up close. Sure, Zolta responded, his voice careful, trying to mask the nervousness he felt. Later that evening, Zolta found himself seated at a crowded table in a dimly lit restaurant. The smell of melted cheese, spices, and something distinctly earthy filled the air. Plates of pizza were brought to the table, and Zolta carefully observed how the humans devoured the food with enthusiasm. When a slice was placed in front of him, he hesitated for only a moment before mimicking the human motion of picking it up. To his surprise, the food wasn't as bad as he had expected. It had a strange combination of flavors, savory, sweet, tangy, and while his nutrient processor was working overtime to break it down, Zolta realized he could handle it. He even found himself enjoying it. Across the table, Emily smiled at him. "You're pretty quiet, Zolta. What do you think of the pizza?" Zolta's mind raced. He had to think of a response that wouldn't blow his cover. "It's different," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Not quite like anything I've had before." Emily laughed, clearly amused. "That's one way to put it. But hey, it's an acquired taste. Stick around and you'll get used to it." The human concept of belonging. As the evening wore on, Zolta found himself slipping into a rhythm with the humans around him. There was a warmth to their interactions that he hadn't expected. Despite the fact that humans seemed to thrive on chaos, they also had a strong sense of community. Whether it was Jake's loud jokes or Emily's easy laughter, there was something about being in their company that made Zolta feel less like an outsider. For a moment, Zolta forgot about the dangers of Earth. He forgot about his mission to observe and report back. In that small, dimly lit restaurant, surrounded by humans who were both alien and familiar, Zolta felt something he hadn't expected: belonging. As they all left the restaurant and walked down the city streets, Zolta couldn't help but wonder if maybe there was something to learn from the way humans lived. They faced dangers every day, not just from their environment, but from each other. Yet they continued to push forward, building relationships, communities, and even joy in the face of it all. Reflecting on the mission. Back in his dorm room, Zolta opened his secure communication device and sent a message to his mentor, Professor Tazor. Observation report: humans are more complex than anticipated. Despite the hostile environment, they exhibit a remarkable ability to adapt. Emotional volatility is high, but this seems to fuel their creativity and resilience. We'll continue to observe. Additional note: emotional connection to humans developing, monitoring closely. Zolta hesitated before sending the message, realizing he hadn't fully captured the depth of what he was experiencing. But how could he explain to his superiors that he was beginning to understand the humans on a level he hadn't anticipated? That, despite the dangers, he was starting to admire them. With a deep breath, Zolta sent the message and lay back on his bed, staring up at the ceiling. His mission was clear: study humans, survive Earth's normal conditions, and report back. But for the first time, Zolta wasn't sure if that was enough. There was something more here, something that went beyond just survival. And as he closed his eyes, he realized he was looking forward to discovering exactly what that was. New dangers, new bonds. As days turned into weeks, Zolta grew more adept at blending in with the human students. His disguise had held, and with each passing day, he felt more comfortable navigating the complexities of human life. Yet, even as his confidence grew, so did the risks of discovery. The challenge of emotions. One evening, Zolta was sitting with Emily and Jake in the university courtyard, watching as the sun set over the campus. The light bathed the sky in shades of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the grass. Jake was telling another one of his outrageous stories, and Emily was laughing so hard tears were forming in her eyes. Zolta watched the scene with a mix of fascination and confusion. Human emotions were still difficult for him to fully grasp. Their laughter, their tears, Everything was so intense. And yet, in moments like these, Zoltar felt something stir within him. It was as if he could sense the emotional energy radiating from his friends, and for the first time, it felt comforting. "You're getting the hang of it," Emily said, turning her attention to Zoltar. "You don't seem as lost as you did when you first got here." Zoltar blinked, startled. "Lost?" "Yeah," she said, her voice gentle. "At first, you seemed so distant, but now it's like you're finally here with us. You're part of the group." Part of the group. Those words lingered in Zoltar's mind long after Emily and Jake had left for the night. Being a part of something, was this what his mission had become? It was no longer just about observing humans. Now, it was about understanding them on a deeper level. And for the first time, Zoltar wondered if he truly belonged here among them. An unexpected threat. The following week, Zoltar's life on Earth took a sudden and dangerous turn. As he walked to class one morning, he noticed a strange sensation. His skin tingled, and a soft hum echoed in his ears. Something was wrong. His instinct told him this was no ordinary day. That evening, as he walked home after another social gathering with Emily and Jake, he noticed a figure following him. At first, Zoltar dismissed it as paranoia, but the closer he got to his dorm, the clearer it became. Someone was tailing him. He turned a corner quickly, ducking into a side alley and pressing his back against the wall. His heart raced as he activated his suit's enhanced sensory features, scanning the area. His vision flickered as the suit projected a holographic interface showing heat signatures in the area. The figure was closer now, and Zoltar recognized the energy signature immediately. This wasn't a human. The being following him was from his own world, a Gloron agent. "Zoltar," a deep voice called out from the shadows, "you've forgotten your mission." A tall, imposing figure stepped out of the darkness. His silver skin shimmered faintly under the streetlight, and his eyes glowed with an intensity that made Zoltar's blood run cold. It was Varek, one of the Gloron enforcers, highly trained agents sent to monitor the activities of others and ensure their loyalty to the mission. "What are you doing here, Varek?" Zoltar asked, his voice calm despite the panic rising within him. "I'm here to remind you of your duty," Varek said, his tone icy. "You've become too attached to these humans. It's time to refocus. You were sent here to observe, not to become one of them." Zoltar stiffened. He knew this moment might come, but he hadn't expected it so soon. His superiors had always been clear. Any emotional attachment to Earth's inhabitants was a risk. And now, Varek was here to ensure that Zoltar didn't stray from his mission. "I'm still following my orders," Zoltar replied. "I'm observing them, learning about their world." "You've become compromised," Varek said, his eyes narrowing. "The humans have weakened you. It's time to report back." Zoltar felt a surge of defiance rise within him. For the first time since arriving on Earth, he questioned the purpose of his mission. The longer he spent among the humans, the more he realized that their world was not as primitive as his people believed. Yes, their emotions were volatile, and yes, their planet was dangerous. But there was something beautiful in the way they connected with one another. Something worth protecting. "I'm not done here," Zoltar said firmly. Varek's expression darkened. "You don't get to decide when you're done. Either you report back now, or I'll report that you've gone rogue." The threat hung heavy in the air. Zoltar knew that going rogue was tantamount to treason in the eyes of his people. If Varek reported him, there would be no coming back. But something had changed in Zoltar. The friendships he had formed with Emily and Jake, the things he had learned about humans, none of it could be dismissed as mere observation anymore. This world had become a part of him, and he couldn't turn his back on it now. "I'll report when I'm ready," Zoltar said, his voice steady. Varek's eyes flashed with anger. "You've been warned, Zoltar. Don't make me come back for you." With that, Varek turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Zoltar standing alone in the alley, his heart pounding in his chest. A moment of choice. Zoltar returned to his dorm room that night, his mind racing. Varek's visit had shaken him to his core, but it had also clarified something important. He could no longer sit on the fence. He had to make a choice. Would he remain loyal to his people and fulfill his mission, or would he stay on Earth and risk everything to protect the humans he had come to care about? The next day, Emily noticed the change in Zolta's demeanor. "You okay?" she asked as they sat in the campus cafe, sipping their drinks. Zolta hesitated. He had always been careful not to reveal too much about himself, but now, with the weight of his decision pressing down on him, he felt a sudden urge to confide in her. "Emily," he began slowly, "if you had to choose between your duty and your friends, what would you do?" Emily looked surprised by the question, but didn't hesitate to answer. "I think I'd choose the people I care about. Duty is important, sure, but what's the point of it if it means losing the ones who matter to you?" Her words struck a chord deep within Zolta. He had always believed in the importance of his mission, but now he was starting to realize that the relationships he had formed on Earth were just as significant. As the sun set over the campus once again, Zolta made his decision. He would stay on Earth, not just as an observer, but as someone who had chosen to protect the humans he had come to care about, no matter the cost. Lines drawn, boundaries crossed. Zolta's decision to stay on Earth, defying the expectations of his own people, weighed heavily on his mind. The threat Varek posed was real. There was no going back now. Every day felt more dangerous, and every interaction with Emily and Jake became both precious and precarious. He knew that at any moment, everything could come crashing down. Growing tensions. The days that followed Varek's warning were filled with a tense calm. Zolta continued attending classes, spending time with Emily and Jake, and pretending that everything was normal. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Varek was watching, waiting for him to slip up. Emily, sensing his unease, pulled him aside one afternoon. They were sitting on a park bench near campus, the autumn leaves falling around them in a gentle breeze. She had that perceptive look in her eyes again, the one that made Zolta wonder if humans were more aware of the world around them than his people gave them credit for. "You've been different lately," she said, her voice soft but probing. "It's like you're always looking over your shoulder. Is something going on?" Zolta's instinct was to deflect, to give some vague excuse, but something stopped him this time. Maybe it was the trust he had built with Emily, or maybe it was the growing sense of isolation he felt from carrying his secret alone. He realized that if he were to protect her and Jake, he couldn't continue keeping them in the dark. "Emily," he began, his voice low, "there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. She waited, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I'm not who you think I am," Zolta said. "I'm not from here. I'm not even from this planet." The words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Emily stared at him, her brow furrowing as she tried to process what he had just said. "What do you mean, not from this planet?" she asked, her tone half-joking, as if she wasn't sure whether to take him seriously. Zolta took a deep breath and let his disguise drop, just for a moment. His true form shimmered into view, his silver skin reflecting the light of the setting sun, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly luminescence. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stood abruptly, taking a step back. What are you?" "I'm not human," Zolta said, his voice steady. "I'm from a planet called Gloron. I was sent here to observe your world, to gather information. But things changed. I've changed." For a long moment, Emily didn't say anything. Zolta could see the shock on her face, the disbelief in her eyes. But then, slowly, she lowered her hand and took a tentative step forward. You're not here to hurt us, are you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," Zolta said quickly. "I would never hurt you, Emily. I've grown to care about this world, about the people here. I've made a choice to stay and protect it, no matter what happens." Emily stood there, staring at him with wide eyes. Zolta waited, unsure of what she would do next. He had feared this moment, feared that revealing his true identity would drive her away, that she would see him as a threat. But then, to his surprise, she stepped closer and placed a hand on his arm. "I believe you," she said softly. "I don't know how, but I do." A wave of relief washed over Zoltar. He hadn't realized just how much he had needed her acceptance until now, but there was still so much she didn't understand, so much danger lurking in the shadows. "There's more," Zoltar said, his voice grim. "There's someone else here. One of my people, Varak. He's an enforcer, and he's watching me. If he thinks I've betrayed my mission, he'll come after me, and anyone close to me." Emily's face paled. "Jake and we're in danger." Zoltar nodded. "I'll do everything I can to protect you, but you need to be careful. Varak is dangerous, and he won't hesitate to hurt anyone he sees as a threat." The chase begins. That night, Zoltar felt the weight of his decision more than ever. He had crossed a line by revealing his identity to Emily, and now the consequences were bound to follow. He had put her and Jake at risk, and Varak would soon realize that Zoltar wasn't following orders. 2 days later, that realization came crashing down on Zoltar in the worst way possible. He was walking across campus when his communicator, disguised as a simple watch, buzzed with an urgent signal. A holographic projection appeared before him, flickering with static. It was Varak. "You've made your choice, Zoltar," Varak said, his voice cold and emotionless. "Now it's time to face the consequences." Before Zoltar could respond, the transmission cut off. His stomach dropped. He knew what this meant. Varak had taken action, and the most likely target would be Emily or Jake. Zoltar ran. His feet pounded the pavement as he sprinted toward Emily's dorm, fear and adrenaline propelling him forward. He reached her building just as the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the campus. Bursting into her dorm, Zoltar raced up the stairs to her room. He pounded on the door, his heart in his throat. When she finally opened it, she looked confused and scared. "Zoltar, what's going on?" "He's coming," Zoltar said breathlessly. "Varak, he's coming for you. We need to get out of here, now." Emily's eyes widened in terror, but she didn't question him. She grabbed her jacket and followed Zoltar as they raced out of the dorm and into the night. Confrontation. The two of them ran through the campus, sticking to the shadows, but Zoltar knew it wouldn't be enough. Varak was relentless. He had to end this now. Zoltar led Emily to a secluded part of the campus, a wooded area where they would be harder to spot. But just as they reached the edge of the woods, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. It was Varak. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," Varak said, his voice cold and calculating. "You've betrayed your people, Zoltar. And now you're protecting a human. Pathetic." Emily stood frozen behind Zoltar, her hand gripping his arm. Zoltar stepped forward, putting himself between her and Varak. "I'm not betraying anyone," Zoltar said, his voice steady. "I'm making a choice. This world is worth protecting. The people here are worth protecting." Varak's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the two Glorans stood facing each other in silence. Then, without warning, Varak lunged. The fight was swift and brutal. Zoltar's training kicked in as he deflected Varak's attacks, but his opponent was stronger, more experienced. They traded blows in a flurry of movement, their bodies shimmering as they shifted between human and Gloran forms. Emily watched in horror as the two aliens fought, her mind reeling from the sight of it. She had known Zoltar was different, but seeing him like this, seeing him in his true form, was overwhelming. Shadows of the past. Zoltar had thought that defeating Varak would buy him time, but it was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. His people, the Glorans, would not forgive his defiance. His actions would be seen as treason, and worse, his attachment to Earth would be deemed a threat to their larger plan. The Glorans would send others, those far more dangerous than Varak. Unseen allies. Emily and Jake were now fully in the fold, though Jake still struggled to grasp the magnitude of what was happening. His shock and disbelief were evident, but there was no denying what he had witnessed. Zoltar fighting Varak, shifting between his human and alien forms. Trusting their friend was the only choice they had. In the days following the confrontation, Zoltar began preparing for the inevitable, the arrival of more Glorans. What he didn't expect was help from an unexpected source. A mysterious message came through Zoltar's communicator one night. It wasn't from Varek or the Gloran High Command. Instead, it was from someone he hadn't seen in years, another Gloran defector. The holographic figure that appeared before Zoltar was a familiar face, though worn by time and battle. Her name was Naira, a former ally from his early days as an observer on Earth. She had disappeared years ago, presumed dead after an assignment gone wrong. "Zoltar," she said, her voice steady but urgent. "I've been watching you. Varek's defeat won't go unnoticed. They'll send the Vanguard." "The Vanguard?" Zoltar asked, his heart sinking. The Vanguard were the elite enforcers of the Gloran military, deadly, unrelenting, and skilled in hunting down defectors. "They're already on their way," Nira confirmed. "You need to leave. Take the humans and hide. The Vanguard won't stop until they've neutralized you and anyone you care about." Zoltar glanced at Emily and Jake, who had been listening nearby. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him harder than ever. Leaving Earth might protect Emily and Jake, but it would also mean abandoning everything he had come to care for. "There has to be another way," Zoltar said, his voice firm. "I won't run, not this time." Naira's eyes narrowed, a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "Then you'll need allies, Zoltar. More than just humans. There are others like us, Glorans who have defected, who believe in protecting this world. I can help you find them, but we need to move fast." New threats emerge. As Zoltar prepared to meet with Nira and gather more defectors, the tension in the air grew thick. Emily and Jake were on edge, knowing that the arrival of the Vanguard would mean war. They trained with Zoltar, learning how to defend themselves, but Zoltar knew that against the Vanguard, their chances were slim. One night, as the group was holed up in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a sudden explosion rocked the building. The Vanguard had arrived. 4 figures emerged from the smoke, each clad in dark, advanced armor that shimmered with an alien technology Zoltar recognized all too well. The leader, a tall, imposing figure with eyes that glowed a deep blue, stepped forward. His voice was low and menacing. "Zoltar of Gloran," the leader said, "you have been charged with treason against your people. Surrender now, and your death will be swift. Resist, and we will ensure that you and your human allies suffer." Zoltar stood his ground, Emily and Jake by his side. Nora appeared beside him, her own weapon drawn, ready to fight. The tension between the two groups was palpable. "I'm not going anywhere," Zoltar replied. "This is my home now. You'll have to kill me to take it." The leader smirked. "That can be arranged." The battle erupted in a blur of energy blasts, hand-to-hand combat, and otherworldly powers. Zoltar and Nira fought with all their strength, but the Vanguard were relentless, their training and technology far superior. Emily and Jake fought bravely, using the skills Zoltar had taught them, but they were clearly outmatched. The last stand. The sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds, illuminated by the flashes of the approaching Gloran fleet. The Vanguard had retreated, but not for long. Now they were coming with reinforcements, ships filled with elite soldiers who would stop at nothing to reclaim what they believed was theirs. Zoltar stood at the edge of the makeshift camp on the outskirts of the city, staring into the distance. The horizon shimmered with the eerie glow of the incoming fleet. Emily and Jake were behind him, their faces pale but resolute. Nora, though wounded, stood with them, her strength slowly returning after days of recovery. Around them, a small group of Gloran defectors had gathered, all ready to fight for Earth. Zoltar turned to his companions, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. "This is it," he said, "the final battle. If we win, Earth will be free. If we lose, there will be nothing left." Emily stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We're with you, Zoltar. We'll fight to the end. Jake nodded, gripping his makeshift weapon tightly. We've come this far. There's no turning back now. As the first of the enemy ships touched down in the field ahead, Zoltar activated his communicator one last time. "All units, prepare for battle," he said, his voice echoing through the small group of defectors. "This is our moment. Let's show them what it means to fight for a world worth saving." The ground shook as the vanguard forces emerged from their ships, an army of towering figures in dark armor, their weapons gleaming with energy. They moved in perfect formation, their leader at the front, the same vanguard commander Zoltar had faced before, now flanked by even more powerful soldiers. The two sides faced each other, the tension thick in the air. Zoltar knew there would be no more negotiations, no more chances to run. This was the final stand. The vanguard commander's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Zoltar, you and your traitorous allies will fall today. Surrender now, and we may spare your human pets." Zoltar clenched his fists, his energy crackling around him. "You'll have to kill us all." With a roar, the battle erupted. The sky was filled with streaks of energy blasts, lighting up the battlefield in flashes of blue and green. Zoltar fought at the forefront, his body a blur of movement as he deflected blows and struck back with raw power. Emily and Jake fought alongside him, their human resilience and training giving them an edge against the Gloran forces who underestimated their strength. Nora, still weak but determined, unleashed devastating attacks from the rear, her precision taking down several vanguard soldiers with each strike. The defectors, though outnumbered, fought fiercely, their loyalty to Earth driving them to push beyond their limits. But the vanguard's numbers seemed endless. As the battle raged on, Zoltar found himself face to face with the vanguard commander once again. Their eyes locked, and without a word, they clashed in a brutal exchange of blows. Energy surged between them, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Zoltar fought with everything he had, but the commander was stronger, faster, his strikes landing harder with each passing moment. In a final, desperate move, the commander unleashed a devastating blast of energy, sending Zoltar crashing to the ground. Emily screamed, running toward him, but Jake held her back, knowing that rushing in would only get her killed. The commander stood over Zoltar, his weapon raised for the final blow. "It's over, Zoltar. You failed." Zoltar, bloodied and exhausted, looked up at his enemy. His vision blurred, but his resolve remained unshaken. With one last surge of strength, he raised his hand and unleashed a pulse of energy directly into the commander's chest. The blast sent the commander flying backward, his armor cracking under the force. But Zoltar knew he couldn't hold out much longer. Just as the commander rose again, ready to strike, a brilliant light filled the sky. The sound of engines roared overhead, and Zoltar looked up to see a fleet of ships, Belis military forces, led by the humans who had been secretly monitoring the battle from afar. The tables had turned. In a final act of defiance, the remaining vanguard forces were overwhelmed by the combined might of Zoltar's allies and the human military. The commander, weakened and outnumbered, retreated with the remnants of his forces, their ships disappearing into the sky. Zoltar collapsed to his knees, his energy completely drained. Emily and Jake rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. "It's over," Jake said, his voice shaky with disbelief. Zoltar, breathing heavily, looked out at the battlefield. The destruction was immense, but Earth had survived. "No," he said quietly, "it's just beginning." As the sun began to rise over the horizon, Zoltar knew that his battle wasn't truly over. The Glorans would come again, stronger than ever. But for now, Earth was safe, and he would be there to protect it. Emily, Jake, and Nera stood beside him, their bond stronger than ever. Together, they looked out at the dawn of a new day, ready to face whatever challenges the future would bring. And for the first time in a long time, Zoltar felt hope.